Today, most people know E.E. Cummings for his distinct, unpunctuated writing style. But he was a writer with tremendous depth, and in my opinion, wrote one of the greatest anti-war poems of all time. Stick around for a reading, summary, and analysis of My Sweet Old Etc. My sweet old etc., Aunt Lucy, during the recent war could, and what is more, did tell you just what everybody was fighting. For my sister Isabel created hundreds and hundreds of socks, not to mention flea-proof ear warmers, etc., wristers, etc. My mother hoped that I would die, etc., bravely, of course. My father used to become hoarse, talking about how it was a privilege, and if only he could. Meanwhile, myself, etc., lay quietly in the deep mud, etc., dreaming, etc., of your smile, eyes, knees, and of your etc. So just like when you're reading any poem, it's important to understand what every word means. So here's 3 words you might not be familiar with, etc. obviously being a key word in this poem since it shows up many, many times. It's actually a Latin phrase. Et means and, cetera, cetera, means other things of the same variety or the same sort or in the same group. So and other things of the same kind is a way to think of it. And there's some other nuances to etc., and we'll get into that at the end of the poem. But basically, if you were saying to someone, I went to the grocery store today and I bought a lot of fruit, apples, oranges, bananas, etc. It means you bought other fruit beyond apples, oranges, banana, but you're not going to take all the time to tell what those exact fruits are because whoever's listening to you gets the idea. The other words are a little more dated here. First off, we have ear warmers, which is basically another word for earmuffs, and wristers. So wristers would just keep your wrists warm, and usually in World War I, they were knitted fingerless mittens. So obviously it's important that you don't have your fingers covered if you are operating machinery or firing a gun or something like that, but you still want your hand warm. So those are 2 things that we don't necessarily use a whole lot of anymore, at least not with those exact terms. However, it's really important to look those up if you're unaware of when the poem takes place because, as I said earlier, they give us a clue as to the setting, which is World War I. Now, when we talk about the final stanza, we'll talk about E.E. Cummings and his view of World War I. He was in World War I, but for now, just know that that's the setting. The next thing I want to talk about is capitalization. We often think of E.E. Cummings as not using any capitalization, but that's not the case. He does capitalize words. He just doesn't capitalize every word that quote-unquote should be capitalized. For him, capitalization often signifies importance. And it's very interesting that in this poem, which covers a lot of different family members of the speaker, Aunt Lucy, mother, father, sister, and then whomever they're writing to, only the sister, Isabel, and the love interest, just the pronoun your in this instance, are capitalized. And then that final etc. is capitalized, and we'll talk about that as well with the ending. So when you read the poem, you'll notice right away that Aunt Lucy, not the greatest when it comes to World War I. She tells everyone what the war is about and why people are fighting in it, but it's important to note that unlike the speaker of the poem who is in the war, Aunt Lucy is not. The mother hopes that her son dies bravely, and the father becomes hoarse talking about how it was a privilege and how he wishes he could fight and potentially die for his country. The contrast to this is the sister, Isabel, who actually does something to help the soldiers, as opposed to insensitive and out-of-touch conversations and lectures. She actually takes time and effort to knit socks and flea-proof ear warmers and wristers as these soldiers are in the trenches and out in the elements for months, years at a time. And then finally, the love interest, who we're never told does anything detrimental to this soldier's journey. but rather signifies his hopes, his dreams, his passion. So now that we know the poem takes place during World War I, let's talk about the format of the poem. On paper, it looks very confusing with these different stanzas all using various lengths and spacing, and it can look a little jumbled. But really, it can be helpful to read this poem as a letter, that it is a soldier writing home from World War I. But it's not a straightforward letter, and there's actually some room for interpretation. In fact, there's multiple ways to read lines that overlap. A couple examples of this are, "My sweet old etc. Aunt Lucy." So Aunt Lucy is sweet, old, and a bunch of other things Aunt Lucy during the recent war. So that could all be tied together in yellow there. You also have, "Did tell you just what everybody was fighting for." So why everyone was fighting for. You also have something like, "My mother hoped that I would die, etc. Bravely, of course," which is like, you know, she said a lot of things, but the one that he latched onto is that she hoped he would die. I'm sure she didn't say that out loud, but maybe he got the sense that his mother wanted a war hero for a son. Now you might be wondering, well, what's the big deal with all of this? That all made sense. However, because there's no punctuation, you can read some of these same lines differently. Take, for instance, the purple here. "My sweet old etc." Put a comma in there, and the poem is now to his sweet old etc., his sweet old love interest. And then Aunt Lucy is separate from that. I'm not saying that's the way you have to read it, but it is an option. Another one is that Aunt Lucy doesn't say what everybody was fighting for. Instead, it's, "For my sister Isabel created hundreds and hundreds." So "for" goes with my sister Isabel. And finally, instead of mother saying "hoped that I would die, etc. bravely, of course," it could be "hoped that I would die, etc. period." And then we switch to the father, and "bravely," of course, applies to him. "Bravely, of course, my father used to become hoarse, talking about how it was a privilege, and if only he could." So it's not necessarily that the yellow is right or the purple is right. Personally, I think some of the yellow and some of the purple in combination is how I would read the poem. I'm not going to tell you what my reading is because I think that's some of the interest and intrigue of the poem is the different ways that you could read it. So I'm going to leave that up to you. But if you listen to how I read it at the beginning of the video, you'll hopefully get a sense as to what I think the reading is. But again, you don't need to worry about what I think. This is for you to think more deeply about the poem, not just do what I do. Okay, so now we've got the structure of this poem figured out. Let's take a look at what this structure actually means. Even though we know the poem is a letter, there's room for interpretation in the letter, and there's multiple ways to read lines that overlap, and all of this suggests a unraveling thought, not an actual physical letter, but rather a letter in the speaker's head. I think it's very important to note that the group of words in yellow, mother and father's words, are about his death. That the mother hopes he would die, and the father wishes that he could have the privilege of dying. And to some extent, at least in the speaker's mind, both his father and his mother hope he dies, because it would be a privilege to die bravely for their country. Then, after the yellow, we get into what I grouped in the blue. "Meanwhile, myself, etc., lay quietly in the deep mud, etc., dreaming, etc." And you can see the poem start to break apart. The etceteras are separated. The stanzas and lines themselves become short and jagged. And to me, this signifies the speaker's thoughts unraveling more and more. The speaker's mind is unable to compose for much longer. And that really brings us back to the word etc. and why it's such a great word for E.E. Cummings to use. Because not only does it mean other things of the same kind, it means things that are too tedious to talk about. Meaning, if there were 300 items in a list, you don't have time to say all 300, so you say 3 of them, etc. And tedium, not having the time, could be because it's boring. It could also be because you're unable to. And here we see that the speaker is unable to say much more because they're lying quietly in the deep mud, dreaming. He could be falling asleep, but given the context, war, mud, flashes of his past, what his parents were just talking about, chances are he's dying. And the red here, where we finally get the your, the person the letter is to, dreaming of your smile, eyes, knees, and of your etc. and other things. Now, there's a lot of ways you can read that. Some people read it a little bit more erotically than others, and other people read it as just other traits about the person that the speaker finds beautiful and magnificent and memorable. But either way, there's not time to share them because there's war, and with war, there's death. Every time I read this poem, it reminds me of another poem, and that's Dulce et Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen. They're very, very similar poems, and that they talk about this message that's in yellow here. This idea that in World War I, the older generations and the politicians and the parents and the school teachers pushed the youth into combat because it was the good thing to do. To die for your country, to lay down your life for your country. You see it show up in the poems, you also see it show up in the most seminal novel of World War I, All Quiet on the Western Front. But there's a key difference between Wilfred Owen's poem, Dulce et Decorum Est, and E. E. Cummings' poem, To My Sweet Old Etc. In Wilfred Owen's, the person is haunted by combat. He sees flashes of someone drowning in poisonous gas that's been launched at them. But here we're not haunted by combat, we're haunted by home life. The majority of this poem is not about his love, but the terrible things that happened back home. Even though people didn't mean them to be, the words echoing in his mind, the words that are the most vivid and clear to us, are his mother's and his father's. His Aunt Lucy doesn't know what she's talking about. His sister did all that she could from the home front. His love is waiting for him, but he won't be coming home. The thoughts that dominate are that old lie. It is good and honorable to die for one's country. And while it's not as visceral as Owen's poem, I think it's a pretty powerful message from someone who saw combat firsthand. And war is always horrible. It's always brutal. It's always involving death, an irreversible consequence. But there's something about World War I, about thousands upon thousands of young boys and men dying by the hour over a few miles of mud in France. It felt completely worthless, this great sacrifice of life. And people thought, this will do it. There will never be a war like this again. We will never be foolish enough to do this again. Unfortunately, we still are, which is why we still need to listen to our soldiers and our poets. Thanks for watching. Happy reading.